good afternoon, Maryland municipal leaders. Happy Friday to everyone. Welcome to MML's March edition of our continuing Town Hall Newsmaker series. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Scott Hancock, MML's Executive Director, and pleased to be the facilitator for today's Town Hall. Wow, what a busy, productive, and historic week in our nation's capital. Many of you on this webinar today joined MML President Perry Jones and me in virtual Washington, D.C. at the beginning of the week as we attended the National League of Cities Congressional Cities Conference. And it was on the final day of that conference that we learned that the long-awaited and debated American Rescue Plan Act, which, by the way, includes direct federal funding to struggling cities and towns across the country, had finally passed, yes, applause, had finally passed its final hurdle in the House of Representatives. And then just yesterday, President Biden signed the bill into law. Such great news for Maryland cities and towns and the American people who are struggling during this pandemic. Our special guest today has been smack dab in the middle of all of the monumental activities on Capitol Hill. We are honored and pleased and privileged to have Maryland's junior United States Senator, the Honorable Chris Van Hollen, with us today to share his front lines perspective. But before we hear from the Senator, just a few logistical notes for those of you who may be attending your first MML virtual town hall. Due to the large number of attendees today, we are going to exclusively use the Q&A feature on this Zoom platform for questions and/or comments for our guest. So please enter your questions in the Q&A found at the bottom of your screen, and we'll share as many of them as time allows today. And if we're unable to get to your question during this town hall time, we're going to share the remaining questions with the Senator's staff so that Senator Van Hollen can reply directly to you following today's program. And secondly, please keep your questions brief and please keep them to the point. And we thank you in advance for your cooperation. By way of brief introduction, a man who really needs no introduction, Senator Chris Van Hollen has been a long-time public servant for the state of Maryland. And by the way, a very, very good friend to Maryland's 157 cities and towns for many, many years. He was first elected to the Maryland House of Delegates in 1991, and then as a state senator in 1995, where he served the General Assembly until 2003. He was elected to represent Maryland's 8th Congressional District and served as a congressman until 2017, when he became a United States Senator. As Senator, he serves on the influential Appropriations Committee, the Budget Committee, and the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. And most importantly, Senator Van Hollen and his wife live in the great town of Kensington, where they have raised their 3 children. Senator, thank you for making time to be with Maryland municipal leaders today. And thank you, by the way, for your early support of direct federal stimulus funding to our frontline municipal governments. We greatly appreciate your leadership and your acknowledgement of the important role that municipalities play, especially during this public health crisis. Thanks again.
Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you for that kind introduction. Most importantly, thank you for your great leadership at MML, and it's been a privilege to work with you over the years, beginning in my time in Annapolis and now at the federal level, and appreciate all that you do. And to all your members, the municipal leaders, let me just start by thanking you for what you do in normal times, and then especially what you've been doing to support the people of Maryland and the people in cities and towns across our state during this pandemic. You are on the front lines and you have been delivering both in terms of trying to stem and stop the spread of the virus, but also providing economic relief for those who have been in pain as a result of this coronavirus. And we have worked together over the last year to enact a series of bills at the federal level. The first being the CARES Act, which was passed about a year ago, that did provide relief to state government and a number of county governments, but did not provide enough relief that went to cities and towns in the state of Maryland. And we did hear you loud and clear, Ben Cardin, myself, the House delegation, that it really is important that we all be providing relief, to those who are closest to all of our constituents, and that's all of you. So that's what we did in this historic bill, the American Rescue Plan, that was signed by President Biden yesterday. We heard you loud and clear, and we're delivering that relief. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment and focus on that in a little bit of detail. But I think it's also worth just mentioning the other dimensions of this legislation that focuses on two other areas. One is direct relief to families and workers. And I'm sure you've heard about the major provisions there. They include the $1,400 individual payments that go to every eligible person. It includes a historic increase in the child tax credit, $3,000 per child, plus it's $3,600 for children under 6 years old. There's also an extension of the child and dependent care tax credit, which has gotten less attention, but is helpful to families. And then, of course, there's an extension of the unemployment insurance through the first week in September at $300 more per month. And the other important feature of that, of course, is we expanded the system, starting with the CARES Act, to include many people who are not part of the normal unemployment system, part-time workers, gig workers. That whole provision was going to expire in the middle of this month. So that was one of the reasons it was so important that we passed this legislation. Then a second category is continuing to help small and struggling businesses, as well as others who have been especially hard hit. There are provisions in this bill, the American Rescue Plan, specifically to help restaurants that have been walloped during this pandemic. That includes PPP loans, the EIDL loans, the emergency loans, but also separately a program for restaurants and some other industries that have been especially hard hit. And then one other area before I get to state and local government is, of course, fighting the pandemic. And there are additional funds both for production, but also for the distribution of vaccines. You've probably seen that President Biden has begun to provide more direct distribution of vaccines to community health centers in Maryland. Some are already participating, others will be able to participate in the coming weeks. Then there's the whole category of funds that goes to help public agencies. And that includes, and this is not taken out of the state funds or out of the funds for cities and towns. There are substantial funds flowing to all of our schools. Every county school system and Baltimore City school system will get funds. There are additional funds for institutions of higher education, whether they're community colleges or four-year institutions. There are funds for public transit systems throughout the state. There are additional funds for airports, everything from big airports like BWI, Thurgood Marshall Airport, to other airports, transportation funding, a separate category for rental assistance funding so that we don't have a tsunami of people who all of a sudden, as we come out of the pandemic, faced balloon payments. So all of those provisions are part of the bill. But we also wanted to make sure we provided flexible funding for those of you who are on the front lines, which are all of you as municipal officials and leaders in our towns and cities. And the state will get a substantial amount of funding. Counties will get a substantial amount of funding, but so will our cities and towns. And collectively in Maryland, that will be $1.1 billion. Now, there are two categories of cities, and for the most part, those funds in Maryland are allocated based on the population of a municipality. We also have some municipalities that are part of the what's called CDBG entitlement funding, and they receive funds based on a somewhat different formula. But all cities and towns will be receiving funding. When will you be receiving funding? Well, under the bill, 60 days after enactment, the funds should flow from the federal government within 60 days, from the federal government to the state government. The state government is to act as a pass-through. They cannot take a cut. They cannot put on conditions. They're supposed to pass it through to you within 30 days. If they don't do it within 30 days, they have to report as to why. So that's the timing of the funds. Now, it will come in two tranches. Half of the money will come within that first time period. The remainder will come after a year. So whatever total amount you see on those lists for your city or town, half of it should come within about 90 days. The other half a year later. And you will, it's important that you account for those funds used. You do not have to certify upfront the needs, but you provide an accounting for how those monies were used. And the Treasury Department may develop, additional mechanisms for that accounting. How can they be used? Very flexibly. And one of the things we learned from the CARES Act was, a lot of the recipients of those funds at the county level had to, jump through hoops and to spend a lot of time figuring out what was an allowable use, what was not an allowable use. Here there are guardrails. I mean, it's not totally wide open, but it is very, very flexible in how those funds can be used. And since this is obviously an area of interest, I'm just going to spend a minute going through the use of the funds. They can be used to respond to or mitigate COVID-19 emergency or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to household, small businesses, nonprofits, or aid impacted industries such as tourism, travel, hospitality. That is an illustrative list. It's not an exclusive list. So you can use these funds to help virtually anybody or any entity that has been hit by the coronavirus in terms of their operations. You can use it to help with essential workers in terms of premium or hazard pay. You can use it to make up for lost revenue lost because your receipts may have been reduced because of the coronavirus, whether it's receipts coming from, things, sources of income that were shuttered or whose operations were limited because of the coronavirus. And you can use them for sewer and water infrastructure or for building out broadband high-speed internet. So those are among the very flexible uses of these funds. And the whole idea is that it's not one size fits all. We recognize that each town or city may have its own unique circumstances and needs. And that's why these funds are made as flexible as they are. So Scott, why don't I stop there? That's a sort of summary of what's in the American Recovery Plan. We do hope later in the year to get to the better part of what President Biden has referred to as the Build Back Better agenda. You know, long before the pandemic hit, we had chronic challenges with respect to the state of our infrastructure. And we do hope to address that on a comprehensive basis, not just roads and bridges and transit, but broadband, clean energy grid, and other major aspects of our infrastructure. But that will be months away at this time. So let me end here. Thank all of you again for being on the front lines. And I just want to say that, I want to make sure that I'm available and my team, my staff is available to you to answer any questions as we go forward. So.
Senator, thank you. Thank you so very much for your comments. We do have a number of questions that have come in, and I will remind everybody, if you do have a question for Senator Van Hollen, please post the question on the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to get to as many of the questions as possible. Senator, one of the first questions that was raised as you were speaking was, how do you think the definition essential workers is going to be applied for the premium pay aspect of this? And will that be determined by Treasury? How will that work?
So that's a very good question. And the short answer is I think that we're going to have Treasury provide some definition of that. But again, I want to underscore that the spirit of this legislation is to, provide a lot of flexibility to local determinations. That said, that is something that has already come up, and I expect there to be more a definition, and we will urge them to do it within the next 60 days, so that by the time you receive these funds, you'll have that kind of guidance.
Thank you. Another similar question actually came up at a meeting of the Carroll County chapter of the MML last night, was in regard to the money that could be used for water and sewer and for broadband. Do you think that this bill will allow the use of this money that's allocated to cities and towns to be used to help pay bonds and loans for treatment plant upgrades that have already been approved and are underway in our municipalities?
So another very good question. This part of the bill, and I remember, we had a discussion about it. First of all, I should say it's very open-ended in terms of the use of funds for those two purposes, water and sewer and broadband. So certainly with respect to any new investments, it would be covered by this bill, right? It doesn't have to be something that's directly tied to COVID-19. We have all learned how important broadband and universal access is, and water and sewer is also a foundational service. This is the question about whether or not the funds you receive can be used to pay the debt service on ongoing bonds is, again, something that we will have to clarify with you. And I've got my team on here taking down questions, and I expected that there would be from this very astute crowd, questions regarding some of the ambiguity here. We're going to have to clarify that for you.
And I'm looking at the Q&A, and there are a lot of questions. May the funds be used for parks and recreation development? Can they be used for storm drain infrastructure work? Not sanitary sewer, not water. I guess the same answer applies, that there's going to need to be guidance on all of these kinds of things from Treasury.
Well, just on that, so you're asking some of the same questions. I turned to my staff and asked, And as you can imagine, when you're writing a bill, as is so often the case, a lot of this does have to be spelled out by the federal agencies that will be implementing the program. What the exact contours of water and sewer are for these purposes, whether it includes, drainage systems, I don't know about the parks, right? I mean, I think it would be, I'm just saying, I think, purchasing parkland or something would probably be outside the scope of this. But if there's a clear nexus to water and sewer, we will see. But we are going to be asking, the Treasury and the other relevant federal agencies to provide some definition on this as soon as possible.
Yeah, I was just looking at the guidance that your office submitted to us, which we made available to our members in an email yesterday. The language to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure does leave a lot to determination by each one of the municipalities to decide what the investment might be and how that might be made.
Yeah. And let me just add, Scott, again, the spirit of this is flexibility. The other part of this is, from a macro level, just stepping back and looking at the economy. There was a big question, there's a bit of debate about whether we should go big or not. And the judgment we received from economists really across the political spectrum, obviously there's some dissenters, but the overwhelming opinion across the political spectrum of economists was that the risks of going small there's a greater risk in going too small than there is in going big. And that if we did nothing, if we didn't provide this kind of stimulus, that we, the United States, would be living with much higher levels of unemployment through the year 2025. So obviously, a lot of this bill is targeted specifically at fighting the virus and providing help that's directly related to people who are hurting economically because of the virus. But there are obviously substantial funds here. And the part that you're honing in on right now, water and sewer and broadband, part of this is to make sure that as we come out of this pandemic, our economy is strong, that we don't have a long period of slow growth and long period of unemployment, and we can be putting people back to work. And these funds can be used to help to meet important priorities and put people to work.
Senator, there have been a number of questions, again, asking for process. And I know you addressed that earlier, but could you just go over that one more time? When is the money going to be available, and how is it going to be allocated? Do they need to apply for the money, or is it automatically going to be sent to the municipalities?
So my understanding is, with respect to municipalities, it will flow automatically, and it will come from the federal government first to the state of Maryland, and that's supposed to happen within 60 days. Then the state of Maryland is supposed to act as a complete pass-through entity. As I said, no tolling, no fees, no conditions, and they're supposed to then pass that on within a 30-day period to the municipalities. And I think, the numbers you've seen, I think, with rare exception, will hold. I mean, it'll be very, if not that exact number, it'll be very close to it. Let us know if that turns out not to be the case. But the state is supposed to provide it to all of you within those 30 days. Now, a state can request a 30-day extension if that short time turnaround period constitutes an excessive administrative burden. And they can also ask for additional extensions up to 120 days, but only if they submit a written plan for distributing the funds. In other words, the states, governors, and I'm talking across, no one's supposed to be playing games with this money. The idea is they get it within 60 days and then they pass it along within 30. And just to clarify, the amount that a town or city will get will be in the first tranche, will be half of the amount you see on those lists. It'll be half. The second half will come a year later.
And I'm sure the very similar answer, Senator, to the previous questions. A lot of things about the covering the lost revenue as a result of the COVID-19 emergency. So maybe if I understand that correctly, if you were not able to take in the amount of property tax, maybe it was deferred, or other revenues that municipalities get, that would be considered lost revenue because of COVID. But it really has to have some nexus, correct?
That's right. It's if the loss of revenue needs to be tied to COVID. Again, you know, there are lots of variables potentially, and I think there's going to be some degree of flexibility, but I'll give you an example of what it cannot be used for in this area. It cannot be used to backfill for a net tax cut. So, for example, if you're a city, town, and you decided to give people a break on their taxes, a net break. I mean, if you raised some and lowered some and the result was no change, then all the, you know, your losses are not due to changes in your tax structure. If you made changes to your tax structure that resulted in a loss of revenue net, then that cannot be backfilled with these funds.
Got it. Thanks for the explanation. And I'm glad you have all of these answers. This bill was just signed yesterday, right? We have we have all the answers. One more question before we maybe get out of the American Rescue Plan Act and talk about some of the other things that are going on in the Senate. There is some concern with some of our members that the formulas that are being used that are based, as you said earlier, on the CDBG formulas that have been in existence for some time, for the entitlement communities versus the non-entitlement communities, that there may be some inequities there. You know, that might be some non-entitlement communities with roughly equal or significant smaller populations and lower poverty rates may receive meaningfully larger awards. So have you heard this, Senator? And you know, what do you suggest to our members that they may want to do?
Well, this is probably a deeper issue then with respect to the overall definition of entitlement CDBG communities. If they're communities that, you know, believe that the formulas are outdated, or if they should be covered when they're not, that's going to be a longer term question. I mean, our communities have been receiving, you know, CDBG funds for some time now. I mean, we have an annual CDBG allocation for entitlement communities, and to date, at least to my knowledge, I've not heard from a lot of our municipalities who are not entitlement CDBG making the argument that they should be included. But there are other formulas used at the federal level that maybe they need to be updated and changed, but these are the formulas that were in existence at this moment. So, you know, it was not possible in the short time period to come up with an entirely different framework for the funds. Now, as you know, the purpose of the CDBG designation, the entitlement designation, is to take into account lower income communities that don't have the same income tax base as others. So that's the purpose behind that. If we need to be updating that on a forward-going basis, we can, but I don't want to suggest that we're going to be able to do that in the context of this bill.
Right. And as I understand it, have always understood it, population and poverty rates for the entitlement communities, that's basically how those formulas are developed, correct?
That's exactly right. It's that combination of factors.
Just to alert you, I think your team will probably be getting some phone calls and some requests to help with outreach to Treasury as some of these formulas are discussed, and I'm sure, knowing and having worked with you for many years, that you'll be there for them.
We'll do our best to make any reasonable case.
Great. Okay, we're going to switch gears just briefly and talk about some other things. One of the questions that we have concerns that some of our members concerned about the state of Maryland's inequitable vaccine distribution, concerned that the federal government's guidelines are too lax regarding how and where the states distribute the vaccines. The question, can we work together to strengthen the guidelines so that more of the vaccines are going to hard-hit places more vulnerable, like in Prince George's County?
So yes, this has been a big issue, of course, in terms of both making sure that we have the maximum federal supply, and then the issue of distribution. So let me just first talk about the supply. I mean, one of the things that President Biden focused on immediately in coming to office was to increase that supply, both in terms of the short term manufacturing and well as the long term. So for the long term, as you know, they purchased another 200 million doses of the original two vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer. Then they've also purchased an additional, I think, 100 million doses of Johnson & Johnson beyond the normal allocation. And they've used the Defense Production Act, something we urged the previous administration to make fuller use of, to increase the manufacturing, to say to companies that are in this business, we need you to be part of this national effort. They are compensated for it, but that has also helped increase the supply, along with some other measures. And I don't know exactly when the tipping point will be, but within a matter of, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4, I don't know the exact time, we'll go from a situation where there's excess demand for vaccine and a shortage of supply to where we have the supply and we just need to make sure everybody gets vaccinated. So that's the supply. The distribution, the way that previous administrations set up, they relied on states, and I will say many of us in Maryland have been very, very disappointed in Maryland's performance in this area. And it's not just me saying it. I monitor daily the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control numbers, and for a very long time, Maryland was at the very back of the pack of the 50 states. Sometimes we were dead last, other times we were sometimes in the 40 to 50s. And that was by measuring how much of the vaccine the state had received that had actually gotten into people's arms. And then there was another measure of how many people per 100,000 were vaccinated. Maryland was really lagging. We've within the last few days been doing better according to those measures, but we have a lot of catch up to do. And the area where we're not doing better yet is on the equity of the distribution, where we are really at the back of the pack. And I will say the congressional delegation, Senator Cardin, myself, and most of the House members wrote to the governor about a month ago, asking for a course correction, more transparency, better understanding of how the vaccines were flowing, how they were being counted based on county health departments. Baltimore City is a good example. The vaccines that were going to Johns Hopkins or University of Maryland Medical System were being counted against Baltimore City's allocation, as if those were going to the residents of Baltimore City. Well, I know for a fact there are people from all over the state of Maryland who've gone to Johns Hopkins to get their vaccine. So that allocation should not could be considered going to Baltimore City. So that was one issue. Now, what has the Biden administration done? They took a very important action. There are now more vaccines flowing from the federal level. straight to community health centers. And as all of you know, community health centers are there to serve some of the most needy population and populations that have been hardest hit. A number of Maryland community health centers are already participating. More will be part of that. But to the final point here, the governor already has the ability to relax the restrictions on who can get it. A lot of these community health centers are saying, if they just get the word from the state, they can provide the vaccine to, for example, underserved populations. That right now that limitation is coming from the state's decisions regarding the allocation of the state's supply of vaccine. I'm open to any ideas all of you have with respect to federal guidelines that are limiting that. As you heard President Biden say, the goal is to make sure that by the beginning of May, every state is making the vaccine available to every adult. But that doesn't mean that right now the federal government's preventing the states from doing that. It's not, the federal government has not said that Maryland can't open its vaccine use to people at younger ages or different populations. Those decisions are being made by the state, and they are, in my view, continue to have a negative impact on the equity of distribution.
Yeah, I know myself, there have been a number of states that have actually started to open the doors to everyone. It's sort of hard to understand, some of the rationale behind scheduling these, but I know the folks in our cities and towns are very frustrated. A couple of suggestions on additional max vax sites, anything you could do to help communicate the municipal concern to the state government. We have, but we're not United States senators, to say maybe University of Maryland in College Park would be a good site, and maybe Greenbelt would be a good site. Anything you could do to help would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, well, we've been encouraging the state. You're right. Look, at the federal level, we have pushed the state hard. We've written in numerous letters and communicated directly with the state health officials about our frustration with Maryland's system. That's also why we pushed the Biden administration for more direct, distribution for the federal government to community health centers. The state of Maryland resisted our calls for change. They said, they've got everything under control, and they didn't. And again, that's reflected in the national numbers at CDC don't lie. They keep track of it. But we will keep pushing, and we'll push for more. We really think that there needs to be more distribution, in trusted areas within communities and churches, and directly in the neighborhoods, mobile vaccination centers, and that's something that the Biden administration, we're pushing them to do as well, because of the fact that the states have gotten overly bureaucratic and not transparent in many ways in how they're distributing the vaccine.
I think we all remember, Senator, the horrific events of January 6th in Washington, D.C. And we, living so close to the district, we have seen the Capitol go on lockdown. We've seen fencing, not just on television, but we've seen it in person around the perimeter of the Capitol building, National Guard troops that are patrolling the grounds. How much longer do you think we're going to be living in this new reality? Is it short term or is it long term?
Well, let me distinguish between the new reality in terms of just the type of security around the Capitol and the reality of the overall situation we have in the country with that resulted in this violent mob attacking the Capitol for the purpose of overthrowing the results from the Electoral College. starting with that last piece, this is a really deep threat to our democracy. And if you talk to the director of the FBI, who was in front of one of the committees I'm on just the other day and has testified publicly about this, we have seen a rise in violent extremist movements, white supremacist movements, and violent militia movements around the country. I mean, this is data from the FBI. And, it's our former president, thrived on division. That in my view is a pretty objective statement. And unfortunately, there are millions of people who believe this fiction that, the former president, Donald Trump, won the election. And that is continuing to be a threat to our democracy. And we are seeing many states now that are putting up more barriers to voting, limiting the early voting period, things that have nothing to do with election security, everything to do with putting up barriers. So I only raise that part, Scott, because that is a deeper issue for our country that we're struggling with. In terms of security around the Capitol, look, we have an ongoing sort of investigation, and we have two new sergeants of arms, a new head of the Capitol Police. Everyone is reviewing everything that went wrong in terms of the intelligence and the response. My view is that we are going to have to beef up personnel, but I am opposed to turning the Capitol into a permanent fortress with a big fence around it. I think that there are ways to ensure security of the Capitol without, turning it into a walled fortress area, because it is the people's house, and this is, the Capitol is a place for the American people to be able to come and visit. Yes, we need security after 9/11. All the metal detectors went up. Security was enhanced. Obviously, there was a big failure. It was Inauguration Day. It was really mixed feelings. It was great to see that the resilience of our democracy and the peaceful transfer of power with Joe Biden being sworn in. But we were being sworn in a Capitol surrounded by National Guards men and women in wire. And so that really speaks to this bigger challenge about really, protecting our democracy and not making sure people recognize that we have a system for a peaceful transfer of power that needs to be respected by everybody.
Thank you for those thoughtful comments. One of the things that's very problematic for a number of our municipalities, and particularly in Prince George's County, is a project known as the SC Maglev project. Didn't know if you wanted to comment, any thoughts that you may have on that project. Happy to put you in contact with a person, people who have the questions, but have you considered that project, and do you have a position on it?
So look, the Maglev project, there are lots of important questions about the Maglev, both in terms of the right-of-way, its impact on communities, which is why Steny Hoyer and myself and Congressman Anthony Brown, wrote and asked for an extension of the public comment period for the EIS, because I think there are lots of questions that still need to be answered in terms of right away. And also there are questions about the ultimate funding and financial structure of the project. Would it be good to have a high-speed link? Yes, but only if it meets all the environmental concerns as well as the concerns of local communities and others. So that is why we have pushed for a longer public comment period, so that everybody's views could be heard as part of this project.
I'm going to talk about one of your committees, not appropriations, but in your role on the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee in regard to housing. Maryland municipalities are always evaluating and balancing policies around densification and equal access. Can you talk about any federal legislation or initiatives in this area of concern, including the status of HUD's review of efforts to further fair housing principles?
Right. Look, this is a fundamental issue, the issue of affordable housing. And I'm really pleased to see somebody I worked with very closely when I was in the House now be Secretary of HUD, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, who was just confirmed. And they're going to, first of all, have to get about repealing the previous administration's efforts that took away the Obama administration's protections with respect to discrimination in housing. We've had as you know, a terrible history of segregation, redlining when it comes to housing. This is a source of deep inequity in income and wealth. And so we need to tackle this as part of an overall social justice agenda. And providing affordable housing is a big part of that. So when I talk about, for example, the next infrastructure modernization bill, in my view, affordable housing needs to be a central part of that essential infrastructure, along with the transportation and links to make sure people can get, from where they live to where they work, and also make sure that we have, greater growth and in urban areas and other places. So this is why I, introduced a number of bills on affordable housing, some of them bipartisan, and why I think we not only have to increase our stock of affordable housing, but also make sure that we have Section 8 vouchers that begin to meet the demand. Right now, there are very long waiting lists for Section 8 housing vouchers. So we need to address both the supply side as well as the affordability demand side, and they're obviously very linked. So this is going to be a big part, I hope, of the infrastructure modernization plan. And it's something I look forward to working with the new Secretary of HUD on.
I believe she was.
I'm glad, Scott, the previous, it had just been called the Banking Committee before, but we are calling it the Banking and Housing and Urban Affairs Committee, which is the proper and full name.
That's what I had in my notes, so I'm glad I said it properly. And I believe the new HUD secretary is also a former municipal official, if I'm not mistaken. Before
she is indeed, and she brought that great experience to the Congress, and I know she'll bring it to this new job.
So we're getting close to the end of our time, but I guess a question that I have now that the rescue plan has been signed into law, and such a heavy lift, amazing how quickly everybody was able to make that happen. What's the next big priority for the United States Senate and for Senator Van Hollen?
Well, there are a number of big priorities, and I mentioned the need to address the infrastructure modernization initiative, which, and I take an expansive definition of that, right? It's not just roads and bridges and transit, although transit's got to be a key part of it, but also expanding our clean energy grid, really fully making sure we have universal access to broadband, high-speed internet, housing we just mentioned. So there are lots of elements to modernizing our national infrastructure. There are also some very pressing bills to protect the health of our democracy and to deal with issues of social and racial justice. And so front and center, the House has passed what's called H.R. 1, the For the People Act. There's been a lot of misinformation about this. I want to just briefly explain the major pieces. One, it will get rid of secret money in politics. Last I checked, that was very popular among the public. In other words, when people are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to try to influence your vote, you have a right to know who's financing that, who's funding it, who's, this is, I had the disclosed bill in the House. We passed in the House years ago. It never got out of the Senate. That's in there. Also, very importantly, national standards for fair access to the ballot box, right? Standard early voting, at least minimum early voting periods, allowing absentee balloting without, having to get a note from your doctor. No excuse, you don't have to have excuse for absentee balloting. Making sure people don't have to spend hours in line to exercise their right to vote. These are fundamental national standards that have become all the more important as we watch some state legislatures trying to take away the ability for citizens to access the voting booth. So those are some of the things in HR 1. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act also passed the House. More accountability, more transparency in our policing. Just as Annapolis was working on that, the federal government needs to do its job. And I've introduced a measure with Congresswoman Karen Bass to also create some structural changes that some of your members may be interested in, so that we create alternative responses to 911. It doesn't always have to be a police response. It doesn't always have to be a use of force response. Many times we're dealing with cases of mental health questions. So we want to create a different structure. Some municipalities around the country are experimenting with that. Baltimore City's, the mayor's talking about doing that. So that's another priority. Fully funding education, Title I, special education. It's a bill that I've introduced. It's got growing momentum. I think it's a fundamental issue of equity. So those are some of the things. I'm very nervous about long-term unemployment, that as we come out of this pandemic, we've seen a lot of people leave the workforce. Be hard to get them back in unless we're very intentional about it. And I've got some proposals there. So look, we have a lot of work to do. The John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act is another piece. So there you have the beginning of an agenda. There are a lot more issues, obviously, to be tackled. And I want to also say to all of your members, I look forward to their input. You've seen the results of your input in this America Rescue Plan. We heard loud and clear that the CARES Act funding didn't get to cities and towns, at least in the extent we wanted it, and with the flexibility that's necessary. And so, as you said, Scott, you were there for the National League of Cities gathering when we were passing this bill, and I think it's a example of democracy at work, and we're grateful for your input.
Senator, we want to be respectful of your time. We really appreciate the time that you've spent with us today. But if there are any last comments before we wrap up our town hall, please.
Well, let me just end where I started, which is really thanking you and thanking your members for everything you've done, during this really difficult year, and what you do, outside of these emergency circumstances to provide services to your residents. And we want to be, partner with you. The people of Maryland are all of our constituents, and they're best served when we're all working together. So thank you. I know there will be some more questions. Both myself and my team will be available to you and your members as you go through this bill and have additional questions. But thank you all, and look forward to seeing you all in person.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Are you going to have the gathering? What's the current thinking?
The plan is we're full steam ahead. It will be a limited gathering at Ocean City, but there will be a spot for you, Senator, I can assure you. So we look forward to having you there in person. Thank you for your leadership. We really like the word partnership because we really feel like we're your local government partners along with our sisters in the county. So we appreciate the fact that you're open and available to us, and we will get your staff the remaining questions. There were quite a few questions, particularly around the timing for the stimulus monies coming to the municipal government. So we'll get those questions to your staff. And thank you for being here. Thanks to our special guest, Senator Van Hollen. Thank you all for joining us today. Before you leave, please mark your calendars. April 30th at 3 p.m. will be our next regularly scheduled town hall event. And our special guest will be Maryland Speaker Pro Tem of the House of Delegates, Cherie Sample Hughes. And she will be sort of reflecting on what will then be the recently concluded Maryland General Assembly session for 2021. On behalf of all of us here at MML, have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe, wear your mask, get your vaccine when it's your turn, and please take care of your neighbors. Bye, everybody.